Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you will have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level.
Hi, vet rehabbers, and welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. It is amazing to have you joining us today. In this interview, we speak to Liza Kimble about trauma or memories being held in the fascia. This interview was a part of our Vet Rehab Summit prelims. If you haven't joined the group yet on Facebook, please jump on in there and come and join us. We are having amazing conversations and learning so much. I wanted to challenge you to share what you learn in today's interview in whatever format works best for you. If you want to write a blog about it, do more research about it, take a selfie and post that on social media, please do that. Tag us in, use the hashtags Vet Rehab Summit 2023 and myofascial chains. Tag us with @Onlinepethealth and we'll share that information on again. This is really about educating as many people as we can about what can happen within the fascia. Some of the really interesting things that we discuss with Liza and with our audience, because we were live, are how horses and dogs can mirror their owners and can take on their sympathetic state, their high stress state, how trauma gets stored within the fascia, causing the fascia to physically change its structure, its composition, and so much more. This was truly an interesting interview. So enjoy it. Before we go into the interview, I want to say a very big thank you to our sponsors, Respond Systems. Choosing the right therapy laser and PEMF system for your practice are big decisions, and that's why Respond Systems has been helping to make that decision easier for over 40 years by offering both Class 3B and 4 lasers, as well as a full line of PEMF products designed for both small animals and horses. As part of the Paul Prosper family of brands, Respond Systems is dedicated to providing you with a customer and patient-centric approach to rehabilitation. Find out more at respondsystems.com. Over to our interview.
Hi guys, and welcome. Hi Liza, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So we're really excited to be here with you today to be chatting about trauma in the fascia. I'm just going to introduce myself and Online Pet Health, so that you know who we are and what we do, because there are so many new members that have joined the Vet Rehab Summit group. I'm sure that you're not all familiar with who we are. Online Pet Health is a learning platform, a continuing education platform for rehabilitation therapists around the world. We love to support you in learning and growing and becoming the best vet rehabber that you can be, whether you're a hydrotherapist, a small animal therapist, an equine therapist, a combination of all of those, a veterinary physiotherapist, a body worker, a massage therapist. There are resources that we have specifically for you to help you grow and continue to learn. I am Anae Lloyd. With me today is Liza Kimble, and we're going to be talking about trauma in the fascia. Hi, it's good to have you with us. All right, we are here for the Vet Rehab Summit. Actually, we're warming up for the Vet Rehab Summit, and that's what the prelims are. There are a series of Facebook Live interviews that are centering around the subject of fascia. There are so many things to talk about in relation to fascia that we had to have these interviews as we get ready for the summit, because the summit is focusing on the myofascial kinetic lines and chains with Wipke Alborns and Rika Schultz, We're doing that over 2 days on the 10th and the 11th of November. If you haven't registered yet, please register as soon as possible. And yeah, let's get going. So Liza, will you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey into understanding the fascia.
Okay, so I have been a human body worker actually longer than I've been an equine canine body worker. And my journey began, back in the 90s. So I've been working on bodies for 30 years now, or a little bit longer even, I think. Yeah, almost 31 years. And grew up with horses, had my first horse when I was 3 years old, and was very lucky to grow up on a farm where I had the possibility of just making the passion and love for the animals my number one. But of course, in the early 90s, when we were qualifying from school, there wasn't that much out there in South Africa. So we could either be vets or, nothing. So some of us weren't all that diligent at school. So after school, I kind of tried to look at various options of working with equines from a healing perspective. And there wasn't much out there, which led me into the human world. Studied all different types of massage, and reflexology led me into the sort of learning about the Chinese meridians, different therapies, anything that was available at the time. I was like a sponge, just desperate to soak up new knowledge and get going, which I did. And really quite early on started formulating my own way of working with the body and kind of piecing together techniques that worked for me. And then was fortunate to always dabble with my horses, of course, in between. But I must be honest, in the early days, even working with the humans, I was very hard. I worked with elbows and fists, and, we were very, very focused on thinking that no pain, no gain. And if we can manipulate the tissues as hard as we possibly can, we'll make a change. And of course we didn't. So 2 days later, the people or the animals would come back and they're kind of like, well, it felt great for 2 days, but the problem's back. And I worked closely with many chiropractors back in the day, and we would also try and figure stuff out. And yet this thing seemed to keep continuing, that our treatments would be effective for a short time. But the frustrating thing is that, we weren't making consistent, long-lasting changes. And that always annoyed me. Luckily enough, I ended up being trained in trauma release exercises in 2009, where I was introduced to the world of neurogenic tremoring and understanding how very important that is in really unlocking the patterns of muscular tension back then, muscular tension in the body, and how everything was still holding together in protection patterns due to emotional trauma. So that really blew my whole world apart, and I really started to work with the body in a completely different way. I also would do treatments where, I think this leads into that question as well that we were going to say, how did that start me to understand that fascia and trauma were one? I went to Germany in 2014 to the very first fascia summer school. And I was very lucky to be there. I was one of 80 people at the time. And we were very intimately connected with our teachers there, who involved Carla Stecker, Robert Schleip, Werner Klingler. We were lectured by Jaap van der Waal. We did incredible scar release workshops. And having my knowledge of the TRE and the neurogenic tremoring, and then applying that to what I was learning at the summer school, really integrated for me how very important it is to have the combination of fascia work and trauma, and that they are intimately connected and cannot be separated. And how that looks is through various different accessing various different parts of the body. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with the limbic system, where trauma is stored in our brain, and how the autonomic responses are mediated by the fascial system and the vagus nerve. So that really brought home to me how to integrate the two. And that began in 2015. Yeah.
Okay, so I know nothing about any of this stuff. So I'm going to ask you all the questions. Okay. Let me actually start here. What is tremoring? Please tell me about that. You mentioned that in your journey,
right.
And I love learning about people's journeys. So thank you. Tremoring,
right. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through the very basic concepts. Every animal in the wild, every small dog, as we've seen during a lightning storm, when there is an element of high charge in the body, massive amounts of adrenaline flooding the system, there naturally needs to be a discharge, because it's a massive buildup, right, of energy through the adrenaline and everything that's going on. Let's say there's a buck being chased by a lion in nature, okay? If the lion doesn't catch the buck, because of the high charge of energy it took for that lion to chase the buck and for the buck to run away, what we see post that kind of event is that the lion and the buck will stand in nature and they will discharge the energy. And it takes a few moments, even a few minutes, depending on how intense the event was, for them to discharge. We've seen that in our dogs. We've seen that in our horses when they've really gotten a big fright, or they're nervous, or they're scared. Pre or post an event, you will see them shaking and discharging, right? Now, that's a very, very natural process and a very important one. And it's something that humans have forgotten to do. So I belong to a group of practitioners called TRE providers, tension and trauma release exercises, which is taught in 35 countries in the world, where we teach humans to tremor again in a very safe way to release tension and stress from the body. And what was very important for me for a long time was doing the manual fascia release on horses and people. You would see them starting to naturally vibrate and release. It could even either go into a full-blown sort of shaking mechanism, or just a very gentle vibrational feeling or vibrational sensation in the body. And that is the discharge and the release of a lot of tension and stress being held in the body, particularly post-trauma. So it's one of the number one healing tools for people with PTSD. And there are many psychologists and psychiatrists in the world who are also doing TRE with people. It's similar to somatic experiencing, if people have heard of that. Yeah, but it's basically really good books, people like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who talk about your trauma is in the body. And this is how we access trauma in the body, through, in my case, manual touch, in combination with teaching the neurogenic tremoring. And we access that in the horses and the dogs through touch.
Okay, very interesting. So we have a question here. In horses, is the tremoring mostly in one body part or in the whole body?
Okay, good question. So that depends. And it also depends on the nervous system of the animal. So we'll find like a young thoroughbred, for example, is a lot more susceptible to having bigger movements and bigger tremors than an older warm blood. Cold blood. You know, like a cold-blooded horse, often they're very stoic, and you find it in their nature and in their body and in their fascial system that it's just harder, for want of a better word. And so they tremor less, you see it less. That would be very fine. You would see it in the muzzle. And of course, the eyes tell the whole story. So when we're working with the fascia release on the animals, particularly the horses, I always look at the eye and see what is the eye showing us, where are the areas where the horse is processing emotional trauma, and you can see that quite well. And then you might get like a little twitching of the head. I think masters and method practitioners are very familiar with the unwinding process, where you can see it in the very gentlest, slightest movements, or you can see the muzzle tremoring, that kind of thing. It can go from that very, very subtle little tremor to full body, to just along the back. It just depends on the animal and what they've been through. And oftentimes, if we aren't even getting a tremor going through the body, or a vibration, it's just indicative of a very shut down animal, where it takes a few sessions and then you start seeing movement coming through.
Okay, awesome. So the first time that I heard about this connection between trauma and the fascial system was in a webinar series that Tulia Luamala presented in our Online Pet Health Equine membership. And she brought up a research article where she just basically planted the idea or the thought in our heads as a part of the series and said, hey guys, this is a thing, and it's actually published. So can you talk us through that research article where he discusses trauma or memory being held in the fascia and what that looks like and how that works?
Okay, so I was saying to you already, it's a very long research paper. But it's wonderful. The research was written by Paolo Tozzi, his name is, and he has done an incredible job of bringing together a whole lot of different aspects of the fascial system and different reasons for how and why trauma, not just emotional trauma, but how fascial stiffness in the autonomic nervous system are intimately connected. So he's taken research also from millions of different people along the way and put it all together in one really, really cool paper. I think the one thing that you're referring to, that Tulia was probably also referring to, and I'm just going to read it to you because it's right here. What you need to understand is the fascial system and the inflammatory system and the immune system are all one thing. So when we're talking fascial system, we're talking extracellular matrix and everything down to the DNA, right? So I'm going to read it to you because it's here. In cases of functional strain or mechanical stress through collagen bundles, known physiological responses involve fibroblasts' mechanochemical transduction and the modulation of gene expression patterns, together with inflammatory and tissue remodeling processes of the collagenous matrix. Furthermore, this is the important one, furthermore, the release of substance P from nerve endings, particularly driven by the hypothalamus limbic system, following emotional trauma, may alter the collagen structure into a specific hexagonal shape, referred to as emotional scar. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. Okay.
So the tissue actually changes its structure. The entirety of this phenomenon may be interpreted as a highly structurally and functionally specific process of encoding memory traces in fascia. And that's just one aspect. There's lots more. That's one little paragraph right there, just to blow your brains out. But if I think I could put it to you in a nutshell, it's like this. Every time we have an autonomic nervous system response, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the polyvagal theory.
No, you can tell us what that is.
Okay, so let's think vagus nerve, 10th cranial nerve, okay, comes from through our neck, looks the same in every animal, since we and every other creature on earth have the exact same nervous system. So innervates throat, heart and lungs, diaphragm, and the entire sexual organs digestive system. Okay. The minute we are in a sympathetic response, what happens? Digestive system and blood flow to the digestive system is restricted. And of course, our heart and lungs are innervated. We've got a lot of glucose pumping through our body, so our muscles, so we can run or we can fight. Okay. So if you think of any animal, this is what's happening to us. So we have that sympathetic response for survival, which is wonderful. And we've got all this stuff flowing through our system, and we've got adrenaline, and off we go. The problem is, what's happening nowadays is we're getting stuck in these states of perpetual stress and perpetual, well, we've got our normal traumas, and then on top of that, we've got our triggers that are then triggering us into more stress responses over and over again. We see that in our animals where we, oftentimes you've inherited a horse, or you're with a client whose horse comes from you don't know where, and we don't know what the history is, and the horse can be triggered into behaviors that are clearly trauma responses, but nobody really knows what the original cause was. So what we're trying to do with the method that I teach is create safety in the body and safety in the brain, so that the animal or the human can start to realize that they are safe and that they're not in that dangerous situation anymore. Because our hypothalamus and our amygdala and other parts of our limbic system in our brain store our trauma memories there. And so whenever we are emotionally triggered or externally triggered into something that is uncomfortable for us, we are again in a sympathetic response. So this is happening a few times a day, which is super unhealthy, because we're getting this blood flow and the innervation to the digestive system impaired over and over again. And that's leading to a whole lot of digestive issues. I think probably for all of us who treat animals and humans as well, the digestive system and the dysfunction that lies therein, yes, there's a million different reasons, but I am 100% convinced the original cause is this. It's our autonomic response, and it's the stress. And everything, as we know in the horse world, it's no longer natural. The animals aren't living out a natural life, and so it is stressful. And they're picking up a lot of stress from us because our nervous systems mirror one another. So it's important to learn techniques and have tools of how to self-regulate us, and then not only us, but how we can help the animals to regulate. Because this constant triggering of autonomic response is a problem. What happens in the autonomic trigger in the fascia is we know we've got adrenaline. There's also other hormones that are released. We have the chemical response of whatever's being released in the system. We have inflammation, a lot of lower grade inflammation that's caused by fibroblasts that is being put into the system. You've got mechanical stress, which is created through postural. If we think of a depression posture, how does that look? Chronic pain postures, they're all linked. So it's like we cannot separate. You can't say the one came without the other. The fascial mechanoreceptors that sit within our vagal system that innervate the inner world, our viscera, okay? Our viscera, the mechanoreceptors that are within your organ walls and within the inner world are the same that are within your tendons and joints and muscular skeletal system and skin. That's why we call the fascia the organ of proprioception, because the sensory nerve endings are constantly giving information to your brain, telling you where you're at. Proprioception, right, as well. So we have the outer proprioception, and then we have the inner interoception. And it's all mediated by your autonomic nervous system and by your sensory receptors, your mechanoreceptors that are in your fascial system. Now you can imagine if we've had a lot of trauma or we've had PTSD, the signals don't work like they should. Okay, so how we're storing our experiences in the world and our brain is not quite always exactly what is the truth or what is happening. And now we start working with a whole lot of chronic pain problems. And this kind of inflammation and chemical inflammation that happens within the fascial system then also contributes to chronic pain syndromes, which it will also exacerbate our internal inflammation. So the viscera, the vagus is a bottom-up nerve. It tells the viscera, and the sensory receptors there are constantly telling our brain if we're safe or not. And if they're not giving information of safety, then this whole inflammatory process starts again. So in a nutshell, we have a problem with nociception and inflammation within the fascial tissues, which is then leading to a lot of chronic inflammation and pain. And this is also the body's memory. And Totsi even goes into talking about epigenetics, that we have inflammatory pain memory from generation to generation. So that's why those kinds of diseases can get switched on so easily through generations, and so on and so forth. And understanding the immune system, the fascial system is the immune system. The fascial system is the ground substance, and the extracellular matrix are where everything happens. So when we want to reverse that through touch and movement, we are able to do that by creating safety in the brain. Because once the brain feels safe, the autonomic nervous system can self-regulate in a much more healthy way and not always be geared for survival. That's always good and fine when there's actual need for survival, but this perceived threat that we are living under constantly 24/7, and our animals as well, is not helping anybody. So once there's a lot more self-regulation, and you can start to bring the entire autonomic nervous system down to a safe space, place, feeling, the organism can heal. Because no amount of work that we're doing and all our good intentions is going to be effective if the animals and their humans are still in a constant state of sympathetic response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's so much to think about there. Thank you. So some of the things that you mentioned now that I'd love to go a little bit deeper into, there was so much. I'm definitely seeing that really high sympathetic tone in so many of my patients as well. And the higher that kind of sympathetic tone is, the more I feel, the more dysfunction there is in their bodies, and the longer it takes to kind of work through all of that. And it is generally linked to their owner also having a really high sympathetic tone. So my second thought that the thing I would like to go deeper into is that you mentioned behaviors that are obviously linked to a trauma response. And I'd love to go more into that, because in these patients where I see a higher sympathetic tone, there are always behavioral signs, but they're still very much within what we consider as a society to be normal behavior. So what would you say are the behaviors that are obviously linked to a trauma response?
Okay, that's a good one, because it is difficult to answer, obviously, because it also depends. So I'd like to talk to you about the model of the polyvagal theory. And these are things you guys must just research. Research the polyvagal theory by Dr. Stephen Porges. Okay. Get the book, The Body Keeps the Score, by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Because these kinds of books, although they're written for humans, it's the same. It's the same, because our fascial memory the traumas are being stored in the body. So whether you're working with horse or human, it makes no difference. Or dog, of course. What we can see in the behaviors is, okay, I'm going to give you this one. So from the polyvagal theory, we have the three main states. It's parasympathetic, it's like the green zone where everything's working, digestive system's beautifully working, everything's calm, and we quite like to be there, okay? Then something happens, we're activated into a sympathetic response, fight or flight. If we couldn't run away and we couldn't fight, so if we think of animals who have been in a situation where their natural instinct to run away was hampered, obviously, because they are in a domestic situation, and they couldn't run and they couldn't fight or flee. For all of us, it's the same. We then have to go into a bit of a dissociation, and that's still okay, but if that didn't work, and if we remain in that dissociated state constantly because we have to protect ourselves, we will go into a freeze response. So freeze is what we can look at or see in a horse oftentimes where we say they are shut down, nobody's home. Now that's a behavior that to me is almost the biggest red flag. That really frozen animal, because in the humans, we know they're the ones also carrying the most chronic pain. So they have that very stiff body type. You can see from their eyes and their faces that they are in pain, but they just, the good thing about being in a freeze is that you have numbness as well, depending on how bad the situation is. So you're preparing for death, basically. And that kind of state to me often indicates that either they have been in chronic pain and now they just shut down. We can see that in a lot of animals that have had pain for a long time, but we haven't been able to see it. And then, the horse is supposed to jump, and then one day it just stops and says no more. And then we get called out to come and help, where it's possibly been building up for ages and ages, but the behavior hasn't been there. So anything like that, animals refusing to do their work, that's a huge red flag, because that's already been building up for months and months, or probably years. And then suddenly they just go, I'm done. Any kind of behavior where you can see there's a quick autonomic trying to run away but can't. And then all the pain behaviors, girthing up and the horse pulling a face is not normal. Like, that shouldn't be just, that's what he does. Yes, after years and new owners and better saddles and better girths and better everything, it can still be a trauma memory. So this is what Totsi talks about, where you can have the neurofascial memory. So fascial memory of pain. Okay. That'll be cool if you guys read the article. There's a whole lot of stuff that, of tissue memory and tensegrity, and if it's, how that all works throughout the fascial system. So yes, there can be pain tapes that are still running that are no longer valid. Yeah. That, again, through touch, I find is extremely effective. I don't know if that's explained a bit of behavior, but I think we all know what sort of a stress or trauma behavior looks like when it's acute. But what I think is what a lot of us don't see is the much more chronic pain conditions, which is really that sort of shut down, nobody's home. To me, is almost the worst, because they're in a freeze.
Yeah. All right. We have a comment here. I feel that the pets often take on the stresses of the owner. When treating the animal, how do we shield them from their owner's trauma? I think there's so much in this to unpack, because dogs, horses, cats, they're all phenomenal to have in our lives when we are healing from trauma. They can help us through that process. But what is happening to them when they are our support system. Yeah.
Well, that's it exactly. They're trying to regulate our nervous system, and we should be responsible for doing that for ourselves. And that is the hardest part of our profession, is that we are dealing with highly stressed humans who are now bringing their animals, who are displaying all sorts of weird and wonderful symptoms, oftentimes linked to exactly that, because they're just absorbing all of our stress. The only thing I can say to you, which is what I do, is the more well-versed you become in being able to explain to owners the simplest things, like, are you getting help? Have the conversation with them that your animals pick up your stress, but do it in a very basic way. But educate the people. I think it's the only way we're going to win. We have to educate the people, have those little conversations with them. I know as animal people, I started the other way around, but none of you really went into the animal world to work with people. You, in fact, went into the animal world to avoid people. That was the whole point. Well, I'm sorry for you, but you can't escape the people. And you're going to have to just educate and know as much as you possibly can to bring that across to the owners in the simplest way. Yeah. And you probably end up having most of them break down in front of you. And then, tell them it's going to be... Everyone's going,
no. I'll send them a message.
Send them a message. Say, but it's a very how they choose to deal with it is up to them. But I think it's a very valuable educating point.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Interesting. Okay, so we're gonna help shield animals by educating owners on that effect and on what happens. Another thing that you mentioned is postures related to pain and depression. And I find that there's so much there for us to unpack as well, because especially when we start to learn about the fascial lines, the myofascial kinetic lines, as described by Vika and Rika, those are emotional lines. And when we have certain, when we have high tone or contractility within a line, like the deep ventral line, that is a reflection of the emotional trauma that's happening within the body. So I find it really interesting that we can make that connection, and that understanding the fascial lines can help guide us back towards that trauma. Can you talk a little bit more about that connection?
That's my favorite story. Okay, so so I realized this very early on when we started working, before Vibeke did her research, because with Tom Myers bringing us the original kinetic chains in the humans, I quickly realized that the link between the psoas and trauma, so in the TRE training we got back in the day, it was all about psoas. So, and then as time has gone, as you've realized, the psoas has become more and more of a focal point. But a lot of misunderstanding lies around the psoas. A lot. So once you understand that the deep front line and the deep ventral line are your trauma slings, they have to become a place of focus. So the body work that I teach in the fascia release, with my technique, we focus, bless you, we focus 80% of the work is on the deep ventral line, because that's where everything happens. If the deep ventral line is contracted, and 99.9% of the time that is in the psoas, which is then creating a pull all over the show, as we know, if we understand fascia and tensegrity. So the psoas holds the initial contraction, because when we had to protect ourselves, animals also have to contract. Of course, they're running away, but they're also protecting themselves. and their underbellies, okay? It's just how nature did it. So a common thing, if you want to think of it this way, is if you imagine a dog when it's scared, what do we see? It tucks its tail in, right? And then it shakes most of the time, all right? But this tucked in tail thing, that is the key. That is where we can see that a psoas has contracted and it has pulled the pelvis into that tucked in look, right? Okay. There's various things that can be responsible for that, but I find it's a very key point of treatment when we're trying to undo old trauma patterns in the body, because those are now stored in the fascial system, right? So we then have SIJ problems, we have lumbosacral joint problems, we have stifles, we have all sorts of end movement stuff going on, which of course pulls, knowing now that you guys will understand the kinetic chain, so it's all ending up in the front anyway. So, oh my word, it just goes on and on. But if we can deal with the deep ventral line in the few places where it pops up, where we can reach it, that's where the magic happens. And if I can just give you guys some advice, something that often people say, okay, it's easy enough to find a psoas on a dog, but like, how do we even get that deep up in a horse without getting murdered, right? The more you can work with the inner thighs, with the adductors, and the higher up you can work in the adductors, understanding that the adductors are part of the magic of the deep ventral line. You are working on psoas. So what I find as therapists, there's never enough focus on ventral and deep ventral. And yet that's where everything that would help the dorsal lines release is within the deep ventral line and the ventral line. So you'll find a lot of contracture in the hind end can be released through that. And then working on the ventral line itself, on the abdomen, which nobody does. And 70% of back pain dysfunction goes away when you work on the ventral line.
Okay.
It's just places nobody ever goes.
Yeah.
So that would be a number one key area, because the psoas has just contracted, because that has been the number one thing that happens in the body. And then it stayed like that. It didn't just go, la la la, danger's over, I can relax now. It just doesn't, because the fascial contractility is so strong. So then the next question comes in, it has to come in, is how do we, the fascia is so big and so tight and so strong, how can our little hands make a difference? How can we shift and shape and change that? So the answer lies in Totsi's paper as well, from things that Flype has lectured for us and many others. When we access the mechanoreceptors, particularly the Ruffini receptors and the interstitial receptors, which are all over the body, we have an instant vagal response where the hypothalamus is stimulated to soften muscle tone globally. How cool is that? Global muscle tone softening. And that's deep, slow, doesn't have to even be deep, but slow touch.
Slow it down. Okay, I love that. Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions, so I'm going to take this one and a previous one that we've gotten. When people release through fascia, do their psychological issues ease?
They do if it's gentle, slow, safe fascia. Remember, only when the organism feels safe can it release its psychological issues. So the more it has touch, I'm going to just say the organism because it doesn't matter what organism, as long as the touch is in such a manner that the organism feels safe. So no hard and no rough and no fast, but embodied touch. So really present touch, being present, whether that's just with one finger like Vibeke and Masterson, and whether it's just one finger here or one line, or whether it's the more full hands massage techniques, but very mindful, present, slow touch will create safety in the organism, and therefore, yes, the psychological issues go. Remember, also your vagus nerve is responsible for your emotions. So that's why you have to have tummy rubs, guys, because it's all in your vagus.
Dogs have figured it out.
I'm telling you, tummy rubs are the key.
Awesome. And then the last question is around PTSD. So one of our yesterday, someone asked, how does PTSD relate to the fascia, and how do we use the fascia to work with PTSD?
Okay, well, exactly kind of what I've been saying now. So remember, PTSD, you've got a chronic inflammation of the system because the brain and the autonomic nervous system still think you are under threat all the time. Okay. So the body perceives that it is not safe from the event that happened, or the many events possibly that happened. So that post-traumatic stress disorder is creating a chronic inflammation within the fascia, okay, through the extracellular matrix and all that kind of thing. And that is how this program is still running in the body. So the vagus nerve is still not giving signals of safety. So in PTSD, there was a lot of dissociation, okay? So you'll find that your lower organs and the vagus are just not okay. They're not giving great signal. There's not great blood flow, which in turn is giving the brain information that it is not safe yet. It's still running away from the lion, okay? Your brain thinks you're still running away from the lion. So the touch, fascial touch, like I said, done gently and mindfully and with a practitioner who can hold space. And also TRE practice with someone who the providers have all been trained well. That combination of either the body work or both is incredibly powerful. And depending what country you're in, I know myofascial, the Barnes method in the States and Canada is very, very good. They do very slow fascia release on humans and on horses. So yeah, it's yes, the fascial system is the key because of the sensory receptors and feeling safe. And then you just need to find a practitioner who's able to work in that way with PTSD. And it's incredibly effective. It'll fast track healing.
Okay, amazing. Amazing. So I have an announcement for you guys. But before I tell you what it is, I'm very excited about it. Lisa, where can people learn more from you?
So I'm giving courses coming to the UK and Scotland now. I have been doing online training, which I've found really, really cool, especially for you guys who are in the States and Canada, although it looks like that will be happening next year just because there've been a lot of you reaching out. But yeah, so I've been training mostly in Europe and Sweden, Germany, the UK, Scotland, and then next year possibly including Canada, also the Netherlands, Denmark, and South Africa. But have a look at my website. The dates for next year are not up yet because there's a lot of people I've got to negotiate with, and we're in that process of, does this date work for you? But it will be up on the website. So that's www.lizakimble.com. Otherwise, the EFTR Facebook page, Equine Fascia and Trauma Release Facebook page. The events are always posted on there as well. But the online works super well. I've got a film that I recorded, and we do the theory via Zoom. And I take you through the TRE process via Zoom. And then I have the whole technique filmed. And then you receive that and you do it in your own time and space with case studies.
Now for my big announcement. It is 29 days to go to the Vet Rehab Summit. The countdown has started, is well underway actually. And to celebrate, we've been working on a special project for our membership for probably about a year now. It's actually been pretty tricky pulling it together, but we're very excited to launch. It is live in the members portal, and it is a CE logbook. Okay, so I'm not the only one, I know, because we have this discussion every year with our members. If you are registered with a regulating body and a requirement is that you have a certain number of continuing education hours that you have to complete on, it's usually a 2 or 3 year cycle. Within every cycle, tracking that can be a bit of a challenge when you're an Online Pet Health member, because there is just so much content to work through. So if that has been a challenge for you, the logbook sorts that out, because it automatically keeps track of what you've watched. And it means that in one sheet, all your certificates are in one place. So you don't have to, after every webinar, download it and file it and put it somewhere special. You can do that at the end of your cycle, right? Which makes it so much easier for us to do that. What is that? What are the other things? How many points do you have to earn? So we all have different requirements depending on our regulatory body, but trying to keep track of where you are in terms of how many have I earned, how many do I still need, what do I still need? The logbook takes care of that. You can just go into it, have a look, and it'll tell you, oh, you have this many hours, and you'll be able to say, okay, I need so many more. And of course, I know you guys are not only learning from Online Pet Health. So when you download your logbook, it's an Excel file that you can edit and you can add additional stuff in from different sources. Like I say, every regulating body has different requirements. So for example, the SABC here in South Africa requires that we have structured points and unstructured points. So you can go and change that in your logbook that you download so that it fits the structure of what you need to submit. And that's really helpful. So to celebrate our new feature and to challenge you guys to get ready for the Vet Rehab Summit, we are running a webinar challenge over the next month, right? And that's going to help you guys all figure out how to use the logbook. It's really easy. It does it all for you. But even so, it'll get you using it and figuring it out and playing around with it. So the person who watches the most webinars over the course of the next month in preparation for the Vet Rehab Summit will win a textbook. We're going to buy you a textbook. At the moment, we're chatting to Tulia Luamala because she is publishing her textbook on the fascia very soon. And it covers dogs and horses, and she's spoken to us about that on Friday. So if you want to know more about that, go watch Friday's pandiculation recording. I'm going to try and get that one for us because no one has that yet, right? We were going to do this one for you guys, but a lot of us already have this book. If you don't have it, go get it. So I think that Tulia's textbook is going to be amazing, and it might be delayed because it's not published yet, so you might not get it at the end of the month. But when she publishes it and when it's ready, I'm hoping that that's going to be our prize. If it's not, it's going to be an equally amazing textbook. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing knowledge.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Response System. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast out to you for free. So go and check them out. You can go to responsesystem.com. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit on Friday the 10th and Saturday the 11th of November. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com.